You are not welcome here.
You don't get to throw me off my own lake and smile while doing it. Vanessa Holloway actually laughed when I said that. Not nervous laughter either. The polished kind. Country club laughter. The kind people use when they already think they've won. Rain hammered the marina roof hard enough to drown out half the conversation. Cold spring rain bouncing off aluminum docks and unfinished cedar railings, while fog rolled low across Blackwater Lake like smoke off a battlefield. Two private security guards stood between me and the grand opening stage they'd built 30 feet onto my shoreline. My shoreline. $3 million in floating docks, fuel pumps, rental slips, steel pilings, and luxury clubhouse lighting sitting on a lake the HOA never legally owned. Vanessa adjusted the collar of her cream-colored trench coat and smiled for the crowd gathering under white event tents. "Grant," she said softly, like we were old friends, "you're embarrassing yourself in front of the entire community." Behind her, residents held champagne glasses under portable heaters while local contractors shook hands near the ribbon-cutting banner that read Blackwater Marina Grand Opening. Somebody had parked a row of lifted pickup trucks along the gravel drive leading down to the dock, headlights glowing through lake fog, while country music drifted low from outdoor speakers. It smelled like wet cedar, diesel fuel, and muddy shoreline after heavy rain. And standing there in my old canvas jacket with lake water soaking through my boots, I realized every single person at that event thought I was the problem. One of the guards stepped closer. "Sir, the board voted unanimously. You need to leave." I looked past him toward the waterline markers disappearing under the floating docks. Something about the lake level felt wrong. Too low. 6 inches at least. Maybe more. Vanessa followed my eyes, and that tiny shift in her expression lasted less than a second, but I caught it. Concern. Buried deep under all that polished HOA confidence. "You should have accepted the settlement offer," she said quietly. "Now this becomes difficult." That got my attention, because nobody had offered me a settlement. Not officially, which meant they knew exactly what they'd built this thing on. Thunder rolled across the lake hard enough to rattle the metal roofing overhead. A few people glanced toward us now. Phones out. Watching. Waiting for the old lake guy to lose his temper. I didn't. I unscrewed the lid off my coffee thermos instead and took a slow sip while rainwater dripped off the brim of my cap. "You filed false shoreline maps with the county?" I asked. Vanessa's smile tightened. Careful. There it was again. Not denial. Warning. And somehow that made the cold morning air feel even heavier. If you've ever dealt with one of these HOA tyrants who thought money and a blazer made them untouchable, comment below with your city. I want to see where people are watching from tonight, because what happened next turned this entire lake community upside down before sunrise. Vanessa leaned closer, lowering her voice while photographers started gathering near the stage behind her. "The county approved everything," she whispered. "And once investors arrive this morning, this project becomes permanent whether you like it or not." Then she placed one manicured hand against my chest and motioned for the guards. "Remove him." That was the moment I stopped trying to save them. The security guard stopped touching me the second 3 sheriff department SUVs rolled onto the gravel access road above the marina. Every head turned toward the flashing amber lights cutting through the rain and fog, and for half a second, even Vanessa looked nervous before she recovered that polished little smile again. Not panic yet, just irritation, like reality had interrupted her schedule. Deputy Nolan Briggs stepped out first, broad-shouldered, coffee thermos in one hand, rain jacket half zipped against the lake wind whipping across the shoreline. I had known Nolan almost 20 years, fished with him twice, helped his brother repair a retaining wall after a flood back in 2014. He looked at the floating docks, the crowd, the giant Blackwater Marina banner snapping hard in the wind, then looked at me standing ankle-deep in shoreline mud beside 2 embarrassed security guards. "Morning, Grant," he said carefully. "Everything all right out here?" Vanessa answered before I could. "Completely under control, Deputy. Mr. Mercer is trespassing into a private HOA development zone during a scheduled community event." That almost made me laugh. Private HOA development zone. 6 months earlier, that exact shoreline had been a quiet fishing bank where kids caught bluegill off rotten cedar docks and old men drank coffee before sunrise. Now there were catered brunch tables under heated tents and valet parking signs stuck into my gravel road like they had always belonged there. Nolan frowned slightly. "This your property, Grant?" Vanessa stepped closer before I answered. The county already reviewed all access authority. There it was again. Not ownership. Access authority. Tiny legal wording games. The kind people use when they know the truth sounds dangerous out loud. Rain hammered the metal roofing overhead, while residents started whispering behind us. Some avoided looking at me entirely. Others stared openly now, trying to decide whether I was a stubborn old man ruining their luxury marina or something worse for Vanessa. Then one of the contractors walked over from the fuel dock, carrying a rolled-up blueprint tube under his arm. Mid-40s. Muddy boots. Exhausted face. "Miss Holloway," he said quietly. "We have a problem with Pier 4. Her jaw tightened instantly. Not now. The anchors shifted overnight. Water depth dropped another 8 inches. That hit me like cold lake water down the spine. 8 inches overnight was impossible without manual spillway adjustment or unauthorized pump discharge. Vanessa saw the look on my face and immediately pivoted. "Weather fluctuation," she said too fast. "This region has unusual spring runoff patterns." The contractor did not move. "No, ma'am. This is controlled drainage." Silence spread through the crowd in weird little waves after that. The kind that happens when rich people realize somebody important may have lied to them. One investor-looking couple near the Champagne station quietly folded up their marina brochures and started walking back toward their Mercedes SUV without saying a word. Vanessa noticed them too. Her smile finally cracked around the edges. Tiny fracture, but visible. Then Nolan asked the question she had been avoiding all morning. Who authorized water control modifications on a private retention lake? Nobody answered immediately. Rain drummed against the roof harder. Somewhere out in the fog, one of the unsecured docks groaned against its pilings with a long metallic creak that turned every head toward the shoreline. And for the first time since this nightmare started, I saw actual fear move behind Vanessa Holloway's eyes. Vanessa recovered faster than most people would have. That was the dangerous thing about her. She did not panic publicly. Not at first. She stepped away from the contractor, smoothed rainwater off her sleeve, then turned back toward the crowd with that same polished board president smile, like the entire conversation about unauthorized water control had never happened. "Everybody please head inside the clubhouse," she called out warmly. "Weather delay only. Coffee and breakfast are ready." The crowd moved slowly after that. Not relaxed anymore. Residents whispered under umbrellas while investors checked phones and contractors avoided eye contact near the fuel pumps. The energy had shifted. You could feel it in the silence spreading across the marina. 30 minutes earlier, people had been laughing over mimosas and lakefront property values. Now nobody seemed sure where to stand. Nolan walked down beside me near the shoreline, while rainwater rolled off the dock pilings into brown, muddy waves. "You expecting this lake level drop?" he asked quietly. I stared out across the fog moving over the water. "No," I said honestly. But somebody was. He studied me for a second like he was deciding how much trouble he was standing inside. "You think Holloway authorized it?" "I think Vanessa Holloway does not build $3 million worth of marina slips without knowing exactly who controls the water." That landed harder than I expected. Even Nolan looked unsettled hearing it out loud. Up above us, somebody started shouting near the valet area. One of the marina investors was arguing with a contractor beside a black Cadillac Escalade while rain hammered the gravel parking lot. Another dock cable snapped somewhere out in the fog with a sharp metallic crack that made several residents jump. Then came the real problem. A young county inspector in a soaked windbreaker walked onto the property carrying a bright orange notice tube under one arm. Mid-20s maybe. Nervous already. The second Vanessa saw him, the color drained slightly from her face before she forced another smile into place. "Mr. Holloway," the inspector called out over the wind, accidentally using her married name wrong in front of everybody. "I need to speak with whoever approved the revised shoreline grading permit." Nobody moved. The rain got louder somehow. Vanessa walked toward him carefully now, heels sinking slightly into the wet gravel. "This is not an appropriate time," she said through clenched politeness. The inspector swallowed hard and glanced around at the crowd watching him. "Ma'am, the county engineering office did not approve retaining wall modifications below flood retention elevation." Several people nearby immediately turned toward the shoreline. One older resident actually said, "Wait, what?" under his breath. Vanessa lowered her voice, but I still heard every word over the lake wind. You are creating unnecessary confusion in front of investors. I was told there was an emergency drainage event overnight. There was weather movement. No, ma'am, he said quietly. There was mechanical discharge. That changed everything. Because now it was no longer neighbor drama. Now it sounded official. Dangerous. Expensive. People started pulling away from Vanessa physically after that. Tiny little social movements. Couples stepping backward. Contractors drifting toward their trucks. One woman folded up her HOA brochure and shoved it into the trash beside the bait shop entrance. Vanessa noticed all of it. Her breathing changed first. Fast but controlled. Then her eyes found me standing down near the waterline holding my thermos while fog drifted low across the exposed shoreline. For the first time since this began, she looked less like a confident HOA queen and more like someone realizing the crowd might stop protecting her. By 8:15, the Marina looked less like a luxury grand opening and more like the aftermath of a bad courtroom ruling nobody saw coming. Rain kept falling steady across the lake, while workers quietly rolled up catering tables under the main event tent. Somebody shut off the music. That silence hit harder than the thunder. Residents stood around in little clusters near the clubhouse porch pretending to drink coffee while openly staring at Vanessa Holloway every time she moved. The shift in public loyalty was happening slowly now, inch by inch, and she knew it. You could see it in the way she stopped making eye contact for too long. The county inspector stayed near the fuel docks speaking into his phone, while two contractors argued beside a stack of wet lumber near Pier 3. Every few minutes, another metallic groan echoed across the marina as the lowered waterline pulled tension against the dock supports. One older man in a fishing jacket muttered, "This whole thing feels wrong," loud enough for three nearby residents to hear him. Nobody disagreed. Vanessa finally walked toward me again around the same time a cold gust rolled fog across the shoreline and swallowed half the marina in gray haze. Her heels were muddy now, hair starting to frizz from the rain. Tiny details, but important. Cracks in the armor. "You are enjoying this far too much," she said quietly. I shook my head. "No, I wanted you to stop 6 months ago." Something shifted in her expression then. Not guilt. Anger mixed with exhaustion. "You think this community survives without development?" she asked. Half these homes were underwater financially after the wildfires last year. Insurance rates doubled. People needed property values stabilized. That was new. Real motivation finally surfacing beneath all the polished HOA language. I studied her for a moment while lake wind rattled loose banners overhead. "So you gambled with my lake. It was one shoreline agreement. You never had one." Her jaw flexed. No denial again. Behind her, Deputy Briggs was now speaking with two men in county utility jackets examining the spillway access road farther up the hill. The second Vanessa noticed them, real panic flickered across her face for the first time all morning. "Who called utilities?" she asked sharply. "Not me." One of the contractors overheard that and immediately looked nervous. Another one quietly walked away toward his truck carrying a clipboard against his chest like he suddenly did not want his name attached to anything happening there. Social collapse spreads strangely in wealthy neighborhoods. Nobody screams first. They distance themselves. They stop standing beside you. They stop defending you out loud. A woman named Diane Mercer, who had chaired half the HOA holiday fundraisers for years, walked right past Vanessa without speaking. Did not even look at her. That landed harder than any argument could have. Then the utility workers opened the locked spillway gate access panel above the shoreline. One of them immediately frowned down into the control housing. "This seal was broken recently," he called out. Several heads turned at once. The county inspector walked over fast. Vanessa stayed perfectly still beside me, but I could hear her breathing change again. Faster now. Uneven. Rain dripped off the edge of the clubhouse roof, while muddy water rolled slowly down the gravel drive toward the lake. Deputy Briggs glanced back toward the marina crowd before speaking carefully. "Miss Holloway," he said, "did your board authorize access to county-controlled water infrastructure?" Vanessa answered too quickly. The contractors handled all operational compliance. And just like that, every contractor at the marina suddenly looked at her like she had thrown them overboard. The rain finally eased around 9:30. But somehow the silence afterward felt worse. Water dripped steadily off the marina roofs, while fog hung low across the exposed shoreline where mud banks had started appearing beneath the floating docks. One of the larger pontoon boats now leaned visibly sideways against its slip, and every resident who walked past it slowed down a little like they were afraid to look too closely at what their money had bought. The county utility crew stayed near the spillway access gate for almost 20 minutes without saying much. That scared Vanessa more than yelling would have. Quiet professionals are dangerous when things go bad. They only get quiet when they already know something is wrong. I stood near the old bait shack at the edge of the property, warming my hands around the thermos, while Deputy Briggs spoke with the county inspector under the awning. Nobody had asked me to leave anymore. That part mattered. The social gravity had shifted completely now. Residents who ignored me for months suddenly nodded when they passed. One older couple even apologized quietly for supporting the Marina expansion at the last HOA meeting. Vanessa saw all of it happening in real time. Every conversation she was no longer controlling. Every whisper stopping when she approached. Her authority was bleeding out right there on the wet gravel. Then another truck arrived. Dark blue Ford Super Duty with state environmental markings on the side doors. That changed the atmosphere instantly. Contractors stopped talking. Residents stared openly. Even the county inspector looked uncomfortable now. Two environmental compliance officers stepped out wearing brown rain jackets and carrying hard cases through the muddy parking lot toward the Shoreline fuel station. Vanessa moved quickly to intercept them before they reached the dock. "This is a private residential event," she said sharply. "You cannot simply walk onto active property during a weather disruption." One of the officers barely slowed down. "We received a discharge complaint tied to protected retention water." Vanessa forced a smile again, but it looked painful now. There was no discharge. The older officer glanced toward the exposed mudline circling the Marina slips. "Ma'am, lakes do not drop nearly a foot overnight without discharge." Several residents heard that clearly. You could feel the panic ripple outward after that. One investor started demanding refunds from a man wearing a Blackwater Development badge near the clubhouse entrance. Somebody else was already filming the shoreline on their phone. Vanessa looked toward me again, and this time there was no polished confidence left in her expression. Only calculation. She walked over slowly through the wet gravel until we stood maybe 6 feet apart beside the fishing dock. Rainwater dripped off the cedar roof above us, while lake wind pushed fog across the shoreline in slow gray waves. "You could stop this," she said quietly. I almost laughed at that. 6 months of intimidation. Fake violation notices. Residents treating me like a selfish old obstacle. Security guards putting hands on me at my own shoreline. And now suddenly I could stop this. "You built a marina on a private lake," I said calmly. "You connected pumps to a protected spillway. What exactly do you think I can stop?" Her eyes hardened. "Do not pretend you are innocent here. You knew this project would fail once water levels changed." That hit somewhere deeper than I expected because part of me had known, not about the illegal discharge, but about the lake itself. Blackwater was old reservoir land, sensitive land, the kind engineers respected because one wrong decision echoes for decades. My late wife used to call this lake the last honest thing left in the county. Standing there watching dock supports groan against lowering water levels, I suddenly realized Vanessa had never understood what she was gambling with. To her, it was property value. To me, it was legacy. By late morning, the marina had split into 2 completely different worlds. Down near the shoreline, county crews and environmental officers moved quietly through fog and mud with clipboards and measuring equipment, while dock cables groaned against dropping water levels. Up near the clubhouse, residents huddled under patio heaters whispering over paper coffee cups like they were sitting outside a courthouse waiting for a verdict. Nobody was celebrating anymore. The luxury image Vanessa spent months building was dissolving right there in the rain. I sat alone for a few minutes inside my truck parked beside the old fishing dock road with the heater running low and condensation crawling across the windshield. My hands ached from the cold. More than that, I was tired. Tired in the deep kind of way that settles into a man after months of being treated like a problem on land his own father helped engineer 50 years earlier. Blackwater Lake was never designed for luxury expansion. It was a controlled retention reservoir with protected overflow systems tied into county flood infrastructure 3 towns downstream. My wife used to tell people the lake had a memory. Maybe she was right, because every shortcut Vanessa took kept surfacing one piece at a time. I opened the old leather portfolio sitting on my passenger seat and stared at the documents inside, while rain tapped softly against the truck roof. Original shoreline easement maps. Reservoir control agreements. Emergency Maintenance Authority letters signed back in 1998 after the flood season nearly wiped out half the county. Vanessa thought this fight was about HOA politics. She never understood she had wandered into infrastructure law. That was a completely different animal. Deputy Briggs knocked lightly on my window around 11. When I stepped out, cold lake wind hit hard enough to carry the smell of wet cedar and diesel across the shoreline. "County attorney just arrived," he said quietly. "And Grant, your name came up inside the clubhouse." "How?" Nolan hesitated. "Vanessa is telling residents you manipulated water conditions to sabotage the marina." I almost smiled at that. There it was. Final desperation. Shift blame before liability lands. Did she mention the unauthorized spillway access? No. Did she mention the forged shoreline grading revisions? No, of course she did not. We walked together toward the clubhouse through mud and standing rainwater while residents watched from under the awning. Some looked embarrassed now, others angry. Not at me anymore. At her. That emotional migration mattered more than any permit. Public opinion inside HOA communities moves like floodwater. Slow at first, then all at once. The county attorney stood near the stone fireplace reviewing documents beside two environmental officers when we entered. Vanessa immediately straightened up when she saw me. Her voice softened instantly into that polished corporate tone she used whenever wealthy homeowners were listening. "Grant," she said warmly, like we had not spent months fighting. "I think everyone would appreciate a calmer approach moving forward." I set the leather portfolio down on the conference table between us. Quietly. No speech. No anger. Just documents. The room changed immediately. Original reservoir maintenance agreements. County flood control correspondence. Federal retention classifications. Engineering diagrams showing the spillway protections tied directly to emergency drainage authority under my family trust. One environmental officer slowly removed his glasses while reading the signatures. The county attorney flipped through 3 pages, then stopped completely at the shoreline maps. "These boundaries were altered," he said flatly. Nobody spoke after that. Outside, thunder rolled low across the lake while rainwater dripped steadily from the marina roofs. Vanessa looked down at the documents, then toward the residents watching her from across the clubhouse lobby. And for the first time since this started, she looked trapped. The silence inside the clubhouse spread slowly after the county attorney said the shoreline maps had been altered. Nobody argued with him. That was the part one thing rattled Vanessa most. Not accusations. Not legal threats. Silence. The kind that settles over a room when people suddenly start recalculating who is about to survive the fallout and who is not. Rain tapped steadily against the tall lakefront windows while residents stood frozen around the stone fireplace, clutching paper coffee cups gone cold in their hands. One by one, people started stepping away from Vanessa physically without realizing they were doing it. Tiny social movements. An inch here, 2 feet there. The board members who used to orbit around her during every HOA meeting suddenly found reasons to stare at their phones instead. One man quietly removed his Blackwater Marina lapel pin and slipped it into his jacket pocket when he thought nobody was watching. Vanessa noticed everything. That was the curse of people addicted to control. They always feel the room turning before anyone says it out loud. "This is being completely mischaracterized," she said finally, voice calm but thinner now. "The board acted in good faith based on revised development guidance." The county attorney did not even look up from the documents. Who revised the guidance? No answer. Outside, another loud metallic pop echoed across the marina as one of the floating walkways shifted against exposed support beams. Several residents flinched. Somebody whispered, "Oh my God," near the back hallway leading toward the restrooms. Then came the real fracture. Diane Mercer, who had ignored Vanessa earlier near the shoreline, stepped forward holding a thick folder against her chest. Mid-60s. Retired school principal. One of the most respected homeowners in Blackwater Ridge. "Vanessa," she said quietly, "did you use reserve funds for this project before county approval was finalized?" Every conversation in the clubhouse stopped instantly. Vanessa blinked once. "The board approved preliminary allocation measures." Diane did not move. "That is not what I asked." The room somehow got even quieter after that. I watched Vanessa carefully then because people reveal themselves when public loyalty disappears. Her posture changed first. Less graceful, more rigid. The community demanded modernization, she snapped. Everybody in this room benefited from rising property values. You mortgaged reserve funds? Another resident asked from near the fireplace. Now the whispers started moving fast through the clubhouse. Special assessments, insurance exposure, lawsuits, property liens. Somebody near the coffee station quietly muttered, "This could bankrupt the HOA." Vanessa heard that too. Her face tightened immediately. Everybody needs to stop panicking. But nobody looked reassured anymore. The emotional gravity had fully collapsed around her. Even the residents who once worshipped her confidence now looked embarrassed standing nearby. One couple actually walked out of the clubhouse completely when environmental officers entered carrying updated water level reports from the shoreline. The older officer laid photographs across the conference table showing exposed pump lines running illegally toward the spillway controls. Mud still fresh around the fittings. "These were installed recently," he said flatly. Vanessa stared at the photos without touching them. Then she looked at me across the table while thunder rolled low over the lake outside. "You knew this would happen," she whispered. I met her eyes calmly. "No, Vanessa. I knew eventually the truth would." And standing there inside that silent clubhouse with residents avoiding her gaze and county officials documenting evidence around her collapsing marina, she finally looked like what she had spent months turning me into. Alone. The sheriff arrived just after 1 in the afternoon, while cold fog drifted across the marina in slow gray sheets and rainwater pooled beneath the exposed dock supports. Nobody missed the black county SUV rolling down the gravel drive this time. Conversations stopped before the engine even shut off. By then, the atmosphere around Blackwater Ridge had fully changed from luxury community event to public scandal. Residents stood under awnings whispering into phones, while contractors quietly loaded equipment into trucks near the shoreline. Half the marina parking lot had emptied already. The sheriff stepped out wearing a dark raincoat and carrying a leather folder beneath one arm, while 2 county investigators followed behind him toward the clubhouse entrance. Vanessa saw them coming through the front windows and physically froze for 1 second before forcing herself forward again. That single moment told me more than any document could. People only react like that when they already know what is inside the folder. Inside the clubhouse, the air smelled like wet wool, burnt coffee, and stress. Nobody sat anymore. The county attorney stood near the conference table reviewing updated environmental findings, while residents clustered in tense little circles around the stone fireplace, pretending not to listen. The sheriff removed a pair of reading glasses slowly before speaking. Blackwater Ridge Homeowners Association is being placed under temporary financial review, pending investigation into unauthorized infrastructure modifications and reserve fund exposure. Complete silence. Even the rain outside seemed quieter after that. One resident near the hallway actually whispered, "Jesus Christ." Vanessa immediately stepped forward into damage control mode. "Sheriff Keller, this is wildly premature. The board has not even had an opportunity to formally respond. You have been responding all morning, Miss Holloway." His tone stayed calm, professional, which somehow made it worse. One of the investigators opened a binder across the conference table showing printed bank transfers tied to Marina development accounts, multiple reserve withdrawals, emergency reallocations, construction overages hidden beneath landscaping categories. Diane Mercer stared at the numbers like somebody had punched the air out of her lungs. "You told us reserve funds were protected," she said softly. Vanessa looked around the room searching for support and found almost none. That was the real collapse. Not legal, social, human. The board members who once defended her at every HOA meeting now avoided eye contact completely. One of them quietly stepped backward toward the door. Another muttered, "I never approved this," loud enough for everyone to hear. Vanessa turned toward him so sharply her composure finally cracked. "Do not sit there and pretend you benefited any less than the rest of us." Bad move. You could feel the room recoil from her after that. The sheriff closed the binder carefully. As of now, no further marina operations are authorized. Access to shoreline infrastructure is suspended pending county review. Then he looked directly at me for the first time all afternoon. "Mr. Mercer, county engineering confirmed your emergency maintenance authority remains valid under the original reservoir agreements." A few residents physically turned toward me after hearing that. Not like I was the problem anymore. Like I was the only person in the room who had actually told the truth from the beginning. Vanessa noticed that shift too. Her shoulders lowered slightly, while thunder rolled low over the lake outside, and another dock cable snapped somewhere out in the fog. She looked suddenly exhausted standing there beside the ruined Marina model display and soaked promotional banners. Not powerful anymore. Just exposed. 3 months later the Marina was gone. Every floating dock. Every luxury slip. Every polished promotional banner Vanessa Holloway once stood beside, like she owned the future of Blackwater Lake. County crews spent 6 straight weeks dismantling the shoreline infrastructure while autumn rain rolled across the reservoir and heavy equipment groaned through mud where champagne tables used to sit. The exposed shoreline healed slowly after that. Cedar grass came back first along the banks near the old fishing dock. Then the herons returned. Quiet things notice peace before people do. The HOA board voted unanimously to suspend all remaining development projects pending financial review after investigators confirmed reserve accounts had been drained into unauthorized marina construction contracts. 2 board members resigned within the same week. Another quietly sold his house and moved out before winter. Nobody defended Vanessa publicly anymore. That part spread through the county faster than the legal filings did. Coffee shops, church parking lots, hardware store aisles. Small-town gossip moves like weather across Lake Country. Everybody heard about the woman who tried building a luxury marina on protected reservoir land and nearly collapsed an entire homeowners association doing it. The county eventually filed civil recovery actions tied to the altered shoreline maps and unauthorized infrastructure modifications. Insurance carriers denied coverage after environmental reports confirmed the marina had never met protected retention compliance standards. The lawsuits alone buried the HOA in legal debt for years. But honestly, the legal collapse was not what stayed with me most. It was the silence afterward. One cold November morning, I drove down the gravel shoreline road before sunrise carrying a thermos of black coffee while fog drifted low over the lake exactly the way it used to before all this started. No generators humming. No construction lights. No event tents. Just cold morning air, wet cedar, and water moving naturally against the rocks again. I stood near the rebuilt fishing dock where my wife and I used to sit during thunderstorms years ago, and for the first time in months, I did not feel like I was defending something. I felt like I had finally protected it. Deputy Briggs stopped by later that morning in his pickup truck with 2 paper cups from the diner off Route 8. We sat there in folding chairs watching fog lift off the reservoir, while county crews finished removing the final damaged pilings across the shoreline. "Community feels different now," he said quietly. He was right. Residents who avoided me for months started waving again. A few even apologized directly. Diane Mercer helped organize a shoreline preservation committee using the old marina funds recovered during the investigation. Families came back to fishing off the public dock area near the south bank. Kids rode bicycles down the gravel paths again instead of security carts patrolling private event zones. Blackwater finally felt like a lake instead of a sales pitch. As for Vanessa, I saw her one last time outside the county courthouse during a cold December rainstorm. No entourage, no clipboard, no polished confidence. Just a woman standing alone beneath a leaking umbrella while reporters waited near the courthouse steps. She looked at me once across the parking lot, but did not speak. And strangely enough, neither did I, because by then there was nothing left to win. The truth had already done the work for me. Looking back now, I think that is the lesson buried underneath all this mess. People who treat land, community, and trust like shortcuts eventually destroy the very thing they wanted control over. Vanessa thought power came from managing appearances, controlling meetings, intimidating neighbors, and pushing people into silence. But real authority comes from stewardship, from protecting something long before it becomes profitable. Blackwater Lake survived because somebody finally stopped treating it like an opportunity and remembered it was a responsibility. That marina collapsed long before the docks failed. It collapsed the second greed replaced respect. And maybe that is worth remembering the next time somebody in a blazer and a board meeting starts telling you progress matters more than truth. Rank the story from 10 to 0. I would love to know what you think. The last thing I saw that morning was fog lifting slowly off the restored shoreline, while cold wind moved across quiet water and the old lake finally sounded like itself again.